Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The European Union has proposed new measures including windfall taxes on rich fossil fuel firms to contain high energy prices. The new plan is also the latest efforts by the EU to wean itself off Russian oil and gas. Is the EU plan enough for the coming winter, as German Chancellor Scholz recently said? How will the EU deal with the energy shortage in the long term? And what role is the US playing in the EU energy crisis? To discuss these issues, I'm glad to be joined today by Joerg Wuttke, President of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China, Michele Geraci, former Under-Secretary of State of the Ministry of Economic Development in Italy, and Professor Gong of the University of International Business and Economics. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, welcome to the discussion. Mr. Wuttke, we start with you. The European Union, I would say, had been grappling with the surging gas prices even before the Ukrainian conflicts. So how is the situation right now? How serious is the situation,
Well, indeed, if you consider pre-pandemic, the gas prices were 1/10, so 10% of what they are today. And of course, that hurts mightily, not just particular small and medium-sized enterprises, but that hurts households. So something has to be done. I mean, just consider that we used to get 40% of our gas imports from Russia, and now it's about 9%, and our storages have been challenged. But as a matter of fact, two things. First of all, is the thing that our gas storage is pretty much filled up again, up to 84%. So about 8 weeks ago, it looked rather grim that we might actually have a really cold winter and industries might have to shut down. That has been resolved. Nevertheless, pricing issue is a challenge, hence the windfall tax. Secondly, of course, it is going to be a cold winter.
Michele, obviously there are countries, even inside the EU, for some countries they are rich in oil and gas. Seems there's a connection issue. Let's turn to John. John, some countries are rich in oil and gas. For example, Norway and other countries probably rely more on import from Russia, for example. We have seen this quite large-scale protests against high energy prices in the Czech Republic recently. But I'm wondering, what about the situations in other countries? Is there equally some pressure on the governments?
Absolutely. I think as the prices go up, as these prices are really hitting people's pockets, there can be political pushback. I think, there's still wide political support for this war in Ukraine, on the Ukrainian side. But I think at the end of the day, money really talks. I think when it affects people personally, people are seeing, high prices of many products. People are seeing their utility bills going through the roof. I think, people are going to protesting. They probably will be more palatable for a alternative solution, peaceful solution in Ukraine. So I think, the political implication definitely will kick in as this war goes on and as these prices keep very high levels.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Wuttke, what about, we talked about the households, the impact on the daily lives of the people. What about the industries? We heard the stories of at least some factories being closed because of the surging gas prices. Is that just, probably single cases instead of a general situation?
If that was directed towards me, I can
yes,
say
Mr.
that,
Wuttke, yes.
Yeah, I can only say, yes, of course, this is not a singular case and this will not remain a singular case. We have industries that are heavily gas dependent, either on the electricity side or on the feedstock side, and they will be challenged. And of course, every government has to see which kind of priorities they set. Is it going to be industry or is it going to be private consumption? So in a way, there has to be a societal consensus on who is going to cut where. But one thing is clear, we all have to cut and we all have to accommodate this. This is a war at our borders, and we have to have very significantly different emergency and temporary solutions in order to cope with this, in order to get through this bottleneck.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has given this annual speech on the state of the EU. Of course, the focus is about the energy crisis, the priority right now to deal with. She proposed some measures, including mandatory electricity rationing, windfall tax, and so on. What do you make of the plan?
Well, I think these are the things that the Europe has to do. You either have to cut back or find alternative sources. The problem is that there are not many alternative sources, and they're actually quite expensive alternatives. The only option is you have to do cutting back. In this case, that's actually rationing. I think it's going to be a challenge for the European consumers who are accustomed to a fairly high standard of living to essentially downgrade and to adapt to an entirely different lifestyle, cut back consumption of energy and other products. It's going to be a challenge. I'm not sure whether the entire Europe can weather through this smoothly. I think we are already, as you pointed out, we're already starting to political upheaval in some countries. My guess is that we're probably going to see more things of this nature as it gets into the winter time, particularly in countries such as Germany, where it's particularly being hit hard by the energy shortages and high-flying prices.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Wuttke, the plan seems to be a quick fix for the short term, but will it be translated into a long-term solution to the energy crisis?
Well, the long-term solution is clearly only based on the fact that we can substitute Russian gas. And of course, as you know, it's not lying on the street, it's not in the shopping center. You have to sign up long-term agreements with Qatar, with Algeria. You have to see where you can build, how many LNG terminals fast, because we have to change from piped gas from Russia to LNG. And keep in mind that, of course, we might have neglected the fact that we should have made some diversity scenarios, because Russian supplies were incredibly stable and very positive for the European industries. But there it is. We have to cut down. We have to get faster into renewables. We have to take this as an advantage in order to actually move towards decarbonization. But again, this could take 2 to 5 years, and the pain is going to be notable, in particular in winter.
Mm-hmm. What about this, mandatory rationing, like countries will be asked to basically cut power use by 5% during peak hours and voluntarily trim overall monthly electricity demand by 10%. Will this move be accepted and followed by the member of the EU?
Well, I mean, we have listened to Ursula von der Leyen's speech, and she actually outlined how people are coping. She mentioned Italy, where basically one company already has moved into the early mornings hours in order to get away from the peak load. And we have to adjust one by one. There are those, in particular in chemical sites, which cannot move easily. And then you have those that actually are able, in order to cater for short-term changes. We really have a problem with the 3 peaks during the day, morning, noon, and evening. And we have to see how that is being resolved.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, other methods, as we mentioned earlier, is a windfall tax, basically for the oil and gas and coal sector, so-called fossil fuel firms there. And I wonder, whether, I guess because we are at war, the politicians would say, so it's justifiable to impose some extra taxes on those companies. But then, how is it received by those companies? They say, we are making money in a legal way, right? We are not violating any law.
Right, exactly. Well, I think these are probably more of a long-term solution, fundamentally long-term solutions. They help in the short run, but they're not going to fundamentally change the overall picture. But let me also point out one important thing. The overall energy market is more or less still pretty much the global market, whether we're talking about oil or even natural gas. Russia is still selling oil. Russia is still selling gas. Instead of selling to Germany and other European countries, it's selling to China. China is selling to India and other countries. Reportedly, some of these countries are actually selling things back into Europe. This is actually, if you think about it, it's a total waste, actually, right? I mean, the European countries are really doing a lip service to their constituents in saying that they're imposing these sanctions on Russia. But ultimately, in my view, the concept of a Russian oil, a Russian natural gas is sort of a very vague concept in my view, because it's all part of the international market. Now, how do you call oil resold by India to Europe, which is bought from Russia? It is Russia oil with Indian oil, right? I mean, this is and what's the effect of doing this other than lining the pockets of these Indian resellers, and while the European consumers are paying high prices, and you call this a sanction? I'm not sure this is actually serving its original purpose. So I think the politicians in Europe need to sit back and think about these issues and be honest and be realistic. And ultimately, of course, it all boils down to a political solution in Ukraine. But in terms of the sanctions itself, I think they just have to be honest and face the reality.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Wuttke, and I think John has mentioned a very good point here. I mean, of course, sentimentally and in terms of the people's immediate response to the Ukrainian conflict, they would say, you know what, we want to decouple from Russia. We don't want to have anything to do with Russia, no Russian oil and gas. But then when you are consuming oil and gas, it could be still the Russian oil and gas via, for example, Indian companies. And also at the same time, you see the purpose is to weaken the Russian side economically, financially. But then if you look at the outcome, they are not weakened probably. So, and then, what is the explanation? How do you sell this plan to the public?
Well, first of all, let me just straighten out one thing. You cannot sell gas that was destined for Europe to China. It's simply impossible, because Power of Siberia 1, which is already coming into China, Gazprom CNPC is coming from Kafutka, which is north of the Baikal Lake. But the one that actually would go into the Jamal gas fields would be Power of Siberia number 2. Now we have to see if in Samarkand they're going to sign up something. And that's going to take a while to build such a long pipeline. So in a way, you can't just shuffle gas from left to right. It's not going to happen. So on gas, China cannot substitute Europe, let alone on pricing. On oil, of course, you're totally right. This has been shuffled around. India took 80% of additional volumes at a discount, China about 20%. But again, these are small volumes. This is not what was in mind. And still, we get Russian oil into the European Union. But of course, there has to be some sort of agreement, social agreement. We are democracies after all. And hence, our politicians are trying to sort of get people to be aware that to counter a war, an unjustified war, you have to pay sacrifices. And sacrifices are certainly in prices and in inconvenience, and certainly also what it does to the economy. But I'm pretty sure that consensus will be reached. But again, it's hard. But it would be very, very cynical if the Europeans enjoy a very warm and luxurious winter, whereas we can see a couple of thousand kilometers away that Ukraine is facing these problems, in particular as we have 5 million refugees from Ukraine in our countries.
Mm-hmm. John, the G7 has agreed earlier to put a cap on the price of the Russian oil at $44 per barrel, which is Russia's own estimated this cost of oil production. I'm not sure how is that working, whether it is meeting the expectation, and now people are proposing to do the same in terms of the Russian gas. Of course, it is not completely agreed upon by the EU members yet. What do you think of the plan?
Yeah, it's a symbolic move. It's not going to work. It's not going to stop Russia from selling oil. And it's only going to go back and haunt European consumers and hurt Europe as a whole. On the issue that was just raised about natural gas, I still quite don't agree with that. And let me give you an example. During the trade war with the Trump administration, China was forced to sign a long-term LNG contract with the United States at actually a very good price. It's not a very good price by that time standards, but today's standard, it's a very good price. Now, China is still buying Russian oil, natural gas, but the actual gas it has to buy from the United States is being resold to Europe. Now, the natural liquefied natural gas sold to Europe, you call it Russian energy or American energy. I think it's it's a very vague. I mean the boundary is very blurry in my view. Again, I want to emphasize that this is an international market. It's a global market. The natural gas goes into a furnace, into something. It's gas is gas. There's no such thing as Russian gas or American gas. So it's just a reshuffling. Essentially, it's a reshuffling of the international market. Whether it comes from Europe, or comes from Russia, comes from the United States, from Qatar, I don't think it makes much of a difference. In this case, what is certain is that European consumers are paying a high price, and somebody is profiting from this.
Mm-hmm. We will see as time goes on. But Mr. Wuttke, what about this, capping of oil prices from Russia? Is it working properly as expected?
Well, let me first, again, I think we get into an interesting discussion over here. If you buy from America, of course, it's American gas. There's no Russian who earns anything. And on top of it, Chinese indeed had a great deal. And now they are rerouting their ships to Europe and make a killing. So China is benefiting, or Sinopec in particular is benefiting. Fair enough. The Europeans like to buy it, they offer it. And on top of it, in a way, indirectly, we are lucky because consumption of gas in China has been low because the economic activities are low. So in a way, it is just a perfect match. It is not enough. It is small amounts, but still it matters. And the US benefits and China benefits in this one. Now, on the cap on energy price, of course, it's all artificial. We hate to interrupt market forces. And of course, that's not a good thing on long term. But these are spectacular different times. It's a war in our borders. Hence, we all have to sacrifice. And clearly, as these energy companies are making a killing right now, the government actually looks at this and says, hey, guys, 2 to 5 years, you have to help us out and basically have this kind of cap to endure. You have to windfall taxes and so forth. Again, we are at a war zone, so war times, and you can't have normal policies in order to safeguard public life with market forces at this stage, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an interesting debate over there. But let me introduce Michele. Michele, obviously the EC President van der Leyen introduced the new proposals to deal with energy crisis, including electricity rationing, including windfall tax, and probably also possible capping of gas prices from imported gas from Russia. What do you make of the plan? Is it can the plan offer a quick fix of the problem right now?
I have been looking at this for the last 6 months, and we are a bit cautious. We believe that it is right, like Mr. Wuttke was saying before, that Europe needs to take some sacrifice in exchange for peace. That's very good and very noble. But the problem is, and I tell you from Rome, the popular opinion is slowly shifting because we have imposed the sanctions. We are doing sacrifices of all sorts, maybe a cold winter, maybe slow manufacturing, and we see no results in terms of withdrawing. So the question that we are asking ourselves as analysts is, we do want to make sure that the sanctions are effective to bring peace. That's the goal, and we all agree. Then we have some disagreement on, are the sanctions really working, or are they really benefiting the Russian? For example, in the first 8 months of 2022, Russia current account balance, trade surplus, has reached 213 billion. That's 8 times what Italy, on a running basis, they will go to 300 billion by the end of 2022. Next year, they will make another 200 for a total of 500 billion of foreign exchange currency into their own hands. So the first sanction that we have frozen the foreign assets of the Russian central bank, Russia is already making it up with the trade surpluses. So I do invite, and that's what I do, the European Commission to do the analysis before making announcement, because we do not want to make announcement like symbolic. We are not in a symbolic war. There are people dying, and people are getting cold. We have a problem in the economy. So we should take away the politics just to be seen that we are doing something and actually do something. And in strategy, when you play chess, you don't announce what your next move is going to be. You just do it. So I think this back and forth, we put sanctions, then we withdraw, then we put a price cap on the gas and oil that we've been discussing for now 4 months, and we still don't know what it means and how we can do it. It really does not help the goal of bringing peace. It gives Putin time to prepare himself to find other markets, to do alternative measures to counteract our measures. So I think we are not doing the right thing. And so we are paying a price, which would be good if it did help, but I think it's not helping.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Wuttke, your response, do you think there's probably maybe too much sentimental response or venting anger at the Russian move? You know what, we have to do something to hurt the Russians. Probably the focus should be on the battlefield instead of, taking some of the symbolic moves.
Well, I can tell you that the energy crisis and gas and oil is just a part of the sanctions that Europe has imposed or the US has imposed. And of course, Michele is totally right. It has, of course, stopped the supply and demand is the same as before, and prices went through the roof. Of course, I guess that was possibly to be expected, but these sanctions are just some of many others, taking Russia out of SWIFT, the European companies leaving, technology prohibition, and I know what I'm talking about because my wife actually heads a Russian oil company over here. So in a way, it would be too short-sighted just to look at gas and oil prices in order to see what happens. It is for Russia a disaster long-term. It is really bad because it might benefit now financially for the next 1 or 2 years even because of the inability of Europe to replace easily Russian gas and oil. But at the same time, Europe has to make a point, and the point is that we could not accept that a neighbor is going to get invaded, a neighbor, after all, who is a United Nations member. So the way we're all in there together, and it's going to be on the long haul. It's not going to be just one winter. It could be 2 or 3. And I guess that's the importance that our politicians have to convey, how to actually pamper in particular low-end earning families as well as SMEs from the impact, and how to make the big guys, the big boys, in order to pay for it. So until basically peace is coming up. Peace is not going to happen overnight, certainly not.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, Mr. Wuttke, the true solution in terms of the energy crisis basically is a shortage. To find alternative sources to Russian oil and gas, from Middle Eastern countries, from US, from Canada. How is that going? Are we seeing a long-term solution in terms of replacing oil and gas from Russia?
No, it's not. It's not going to be short-term, and nothing in this respect is short-term. Not gaining peace, not getting a replacement by gas. I mean, gas fields are difficult to develop. It can take up to 10 years. Oil fields equally. Again, we have relief by the fact that China buys less than it normally does, and so that helps certainly. But at the same time, we have to really go for decarbonization. We have to get more wind, more solar. We have to actually really force our industries in order to become more energy efficient. We have to put more money and purposes into housing installation, get people to actually accept lower temperatures in winter and so forth. It's going to be a lot of measures, but one thing is for clear. I think Ursula von der Leyen said it today very clearly. There is no compromise when it comes to energy and peace. Peace has to come first, and then we can talk about energy.
Mm-hmm. Well, Michele, obviously now one alternative sources of the oil and gas probably is the U.S. In particular, LNG, right, liquefied natural gas, to replace the gas through pipelines from Russia. So that seems to, that will be lasting, becoming permanent. Michele?
No. And I agree with Joerg. We cannot substitute pipeline gas with LNG for 2 reasons. One, Europe as a whole does have some spare capacity in LNG because we need to regasify it, but it is mostly in countries like UK, Spain, and Turkey that for different reasons are, Turkey is not going to help EU, the UK is outside the EU, and Spain does not have pipelines to the rest of Europe. So the spare capacity that we have is not useful, it cannot be used. And also, the United States really does not have all that LNG to supply. We buy roughly 150, 170 billion cubic meters of gas from Russia. The USA has said it's going to offer about 15, so about 10%. That's about it. We still have a shortage that cannot be replaced because, again, pipelines need time to be built. LNG facilities also need time to be built. Qatar, which is a supplier of LNG, answered back to Europe and said, we actually have lots of clients in Asia, so we cannot really divert our gas, this is Qatar speaking, to Europe, unless you have a big plan for the next 10, 20 years, and you have long-term contract with us. And we don't want to have long-term contracts. So we're a little bit stuck in a situation where we are not managing, and we cannot replace Russian gas with something else. Russia is really a big component, and we don't want to go back to the reason why this has happened. But I give you maybe I remind you something. In the early days of the sanction, it was the EU saying we must stop imports for gas to hurt Russia. Now it's Russia stopping the flow of gas to Europe because they understood, and this was one of the mistakes, to announce sanctions without thinking that it would hurt us more than it would hurt Russia. Now it's stopping it. And so Germany does not get a lot of gas via Nord Stream 1. So we are in a little tricky situation. And I think if I may say, the general political circles in European countries don't have maybe the necessary understanding of how global market works, of how to tell people, because we are democracies, and at some point people will say, you know what, we are all for peace, we support the Ukrainian women and children, but are we going to do this for 2 or 3 years? Because if we do sanctions that hurt Russia only in the long term, but not in the short term, then we are also admitting that the war will not end soon. And so in a way, we are admitting that some of the sanctions do not work in the short term.
Yes.
But people don't have a lot of time to wait. We cannot do 2 winters in the cold.
Mm-hmm. John, briefly, so it is not easy to find a long-term solution, to find alternative sources for the Russian oil and gas.
Well, I mean, look at what's happening in Germany. I mean, they're actually opening coal-fired power plants.
Sorry, John, seems there's something wrong with your mic over there. So, Mr. Wuttke, the question to you. So it will take some time. How long do you think that it will take to finally stabilize the supply of oil and gas to the European market?
Well, frankly, nobody knows because we don't know the availability. We don't know how this war is going to proceed. But one thing is for sure, we have to distinguish between gas and oil as an energy, and we have to distinguish that gas and oil as a feedstock for industries. And there, of course, it's irreplaceable. Whereas on energy, of course, we can build more coal-fired power stations. We can actually restart nuclear power stations and so on and so on. So on energy, actually, I'm not too worried about it. Of course, the industry, such as the chemical industry, needs gas for feedstock. But again, we are in for something that's going to be on the long haul. And the only solution is innovation, is that we really find ways and means how to replace gas and oil in industrial processes and so forth. And that might benefit us. Maybe that's a stressful situation right now, but we might look back and say, you know, that was Sputnik days.
Right. On that note, we conclude today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.